Hey, here it's Mr. Han. Here are today's notes on simplifying square roots. So here, the first thing we want to do is look at this box and notice this. The main idea here is kind of like reducing fractions. Our goal is to get smaller numbers. So the main point of simplifying, like any other equation we would simplify, is to make it smaller, to make it easier to read. So it's like reducing fractions or getting small numbers. So the goal here is to make whole numbers out of square roots. So right now we're going to look at a couple of examples of square roots and how a whole number comes out, right? So here we have the square root of 9 times the square root of 9. And there are three different ways to look at it. So the first one, we could take the square root of 9 and multiply 9 times 9 and get the square root of 81. And notice that the answer is 9. Okay, so when we have two pairs, or one pair, right, of the same number, the same square root, you're going to notice that the whole number is going to come out. Okay, so the square root of 9 times the square root of 9 is 9. Here, we could also look at it like this. The square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 9 is 3, so 3 times 3 is 9. Okay? Or right here, the square root of 9 times the square root of 9 is the same thing as 9 squared, and right there we can pull the 9 out. Okay? So these are three different ways we could look at the square roots and simplify and pull out the whole number. Okay? So like I said, the goal here is to pull out the whole numbers of the square root. Now, we're going to look at our first example, simplify the square root of 24. Okay, the first method we're going to be talking about is going to be the easier method. Okay, but takes longer. So the first thing we need to do for this method is do prime factorization. Now you might be wondering what prime factorization is. Prime factorization is when we get the prime number. So if you don't know what a prime number is, it's when the number cannot be multiplied except 1. I'll just show you an example. So 24, we're going to break this down. What numbers can we multiply to get 24? You could think, oh, it's an even number. We can multiply 2 and 12. Okay, and right here, prime factorization, we're going to have to find prime numbers. Now, 2 is a prime number. How do we know? We can't break this down, right? Except by 2 and 1. And right there, that's it. Then we're going to keep going on forever. So we could say that 2 is a prime number. We can't break that down anymore. But 12 we can. So we're going to take 12. We're going to say that's the square root of 6 times the square root of 2. 6 times 2, and 6 is the square root of 3 times the square root of 2. 3 is a prime number, 2 is a prime number, and 2 is a prime number. So right here we found all the prime numbers. Here I'll give you a list of some prime numbers. Okay, 2, 3, 4 is not a prime number. We could say 2 times 2, so 4 won't work. 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. Okay, and there are more, but these are the smallest prime numbers. So we're going to be looking for these kinds of numbers over here. Okay. Our second method is to choose. What am I doing? Go back. So once we found the prime numbers, we're going to look for pairs. So in order to do that, we're going to reorder them from least to greatest. So I'm going to take square root of 2 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 3. Okay, and what we need to do is we need to look for pairs. Okay, so we're going to go here and we're going to find a pair. And remember, from up here, if we have a pair of square roots that's the same, okay, the whole number is going to come out. So that's going to equal, just like square root of 9 times square root of 9 equals 9. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2, we're going to pull out a whole number, and that's going to be 2. Okay, and we still have these leftovers. We can't create any more pairs, so that's times the square root of 2 times the square root of 3. And we're just going to multiply those back together, and we get 2 square root of 6. So that right there is a simplified version of, so that's the same thing that equals square root of 24. Okay, so this is the simplified That's what we're trying to do. That's our goal here. Okay. So we're going to go over the second method, which is, I'd say harder, but quick. And it requires some planning, okay? So here we're going to choose a perfect square that square roots evenly. So here we're going to find the factors, right? The numbers that we can multiply, but we want to find a number that's a perfect square. If you don't remember perfect squares, here's a list: 4, 9, 16, 25. This is supposed to be 36 because 6 times 6 is 36, right? 49, 7 times 7. So here we could take the square root of 4, right? 4 times 6. And we know that 4 is going to be a prime number. Okay? But 6 we're going to break up. Okay? We're going to break that up to, and actually I'm going to change this to pink. That's a perfect square. So 6 square root of 2 square root of 3. Okay? And we're going to write the square root of 4 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 3. And the square root of 4 is 2, okay? That's 2 square root of 2 times the square root of 2 equals 4. The square root of 4. Okay? So 2 times the square root of 6. And that's our final answer. Okay? So here there are two different ways. There's one that takes a little bit longer, but you can break down the numbers in any way you want until you get prime factors, or you could try to factor out a perfect square right away. Okay, so these are the two different methods. So I'm going to do this a little bit more quickly. Okay, so square root of 18, we can break that up to square root of square root 18. We could say 2 times 9. Actually, I'm going to save this one for 2 times 9, and I'm going to actually break it up to a different number 1 second. I'm going to break it up to, let's see, this is, I'm going to break it up to 3 and 6 instead, okay? 3 and 6. And 3 is a prime factor. But 6 can be square root of 3 times the square root of 2. Those two are prime numbers, so I'm going to reorder them from smallest to greatest. And here I can find a pair. And we get 3. And our leftovers is square root of 2. So our answer here is 3 square root of 2. Okay. Our second method, this is wrong way, square root of 9. I can break it up to square root of, I'm going to try to grab a perfect square right here from this list, and I know square root of 9 is there. So square root of 9 times the square root of 2. That's why I saved that one. And this is a perfect square, so I'm going to circle that in pink. And this right here is a square prime number, so we can't break that up. So this will become 3, because the square root of 3, 3 times the square root of 3 equals the square root of 9. So the 3 will come out. 3, and we have our leftovers square root of 2. So that's our answer right there. Okay. So we get the same answer two different ways. You might have just gone 9 to 2 and figured that out quickly. So the first method is we just find any number we can multiply to get 18. The second one, we're trying to think, so we need to know our math facts a little bit better. And you might be able to know right away, oh, 9 is a perfect square, and you're trying to pull that out. Okay. So here's our third example, square root of 80. Since it's a 0, we know that we could take out 10 and 8. And this is square root of 5 times the square root of 2. Square root of, square root of 4. 5 times the square root of 2. 2's are done. square root of 5 is done. So here, okay, I'm going to reorder it. Square root of 2 times the 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 square root of 5. I'm going to find my pairs. 1, 2. So this is going to be 2. This is going to be 2 times the square root of 5. 2 times 2 is 4. And we still have the square root of 5. So that's going to be our answer. Alright. Here we're going to use the method where we're trying to find a perfect square. So in my head I know 80, okay? We could take 80 and we could simplify that by multiplying 80 by 16 times 5, okay? So this is the square root of 16 and the square root of 5. Okay, and 16 is a perfect square root. That's going to come out to 4, and the square root of 5 is a prime number. So there's our answer. Okay. Next. This one looks a little bit different because there's a -7 in front. So what we're going to do is we're just going to save this -7 for now. Just ignore it. We're going to come back to it later. Okay. So we're going to take 150 and we're going to need to break it up. So 150 we could break up to square root of 15 and the square root of 10. And then 15 we could break down to 5 times 3. And the square root of 10 is square root of 5 times the square root of 2. And then we're going to rewrite it in order. Square root of 2 times the square root of 3 times the square root of 5 times the square root of 5. Find my pairs. Here's a pair so that the 5 is going to come out our whole number. And we have the square root of 2 times the square root of 3. And right here we can multiply these two and we get 5 square root of 6. Okay. Oh, let's move this mouse. Okay. Oh, and we're not done because we still have our -7. I told you to save that, right? So -7. And right here we just need to multiply -7 times 5 and we get -35 square root of 6. Okay. So that number that we saved, that just means that it's already out, the whole number is out, and we're just going to multiply that by the 5. Okay. Here we're going to look at 150. Our list goes 4, 9, 3 times 3, 4 times 4, 5 times 5, 36, 49. And I know that 25 goes into 150. So I'm going to break this up to 25. If I think of quarters, how many quarters does it take to get $1.50? Right, that's going to be 6. So 25 is a perfect square. That's going to get us 5. And I can break down 6, but it's going to come back together. Square root of 3 times the square root of 2. And that right there is going to equal square root of 6. So we have 5 square root of 6. But remember, we have the -7 times 5 times the square root of 6. So -7 times 5 is 35. -35 square root of 6. And that's our final answer. Here's our last example. 8 square root of 108. So here we're going to take our 8. We'll save that for now. And let's break this up. 108. We know that that's an even number. Okay. So we could break that up to 2 and 54. 2 is a prime number. 54 we could break up to square root of 6 times the square root of 9. And then 6 can break up to square root of 2 times the square root of 3. And here we have square root of 3 times square root of 3. So here I'm going to circle all of my prime numbers. Okay. Reorder them. Don't forget that square root of 2 up there. And then what I need to do is I need to find my pairs. So here's one pair, here's another pair. So here we're going to have 2, 3, and the square root of 3. So when you multiply all this, we're going to get 6 square root of 3. Okay, but do not forget this 8 like I did last time, right? This 8. So 8 times 6 and 8 times 6. Okay. It's going to get us 48 square root of 3. That's our answer. Sorry, I moved the computer. Alright. Or here's our other way. We need to find a perfect square. So I'm going to just take this list right here, duplicate it. Okay, and for this one, okay, 36 is going to go in. And this is a trickier one, but this is the square root of 36 times the square root of 3, and don't forget the 8 is out there. Okay, this is, I'm going to circle it in pink because it's a perfect square root. That's going to equal 6. Oh, I keep getting the wrong blue. 8 times 6 times the square root of 3, and 8 times 6 is 48 square root of 3. Okay, so here we have our examples, simplifying square roots. You can go out, check out your homework now. I'm going to just go over this first one. So square root of 8, I can break that up. Square root of 4 times the square root of 2. And I know that right here, this is a perfect square. So 2 will come out. So our answer here is 2 square root of 2. I can find that right here. 12. So 12 is L. So I'm going to go find 12 and put L. If you feel like there isn't enough room, you could always copy this and do the work. So down here you can say L is the square root of 8, and you can break that up here. Square root of 4 times the square root of 2, and right here you can break that down to 2 square root of 2, and that's our answer here. Okay. So you feel free to use the workspace down here. If you want to use an actual sheet of paper, you're more than welcome to. Just take a picture of that sheet of paper and then upload it on Neo. Okay, so here's your homework. Best of luck. If you have any questions, make sure you save it for our Zoom call. Okay.